Karachi. I can tell. This guy's not from there. From the English, you can just tell immediately, right? And from the Urdu, you can tell immediately. From the Arabic, you can tell immediately. That's spoken Arabic. Guess what we are not learning in this class? Spoken Arabic. We're not learning that in this class. There are many wonderful programs that teach that sort of thing across the United States in different universities. You can specialize in dialects. You can learn the Iraqi accent. You can learn the Egyptian Arabic. You can learn them. There are proper studies in that. However, we're also not going to be learning standard Arabic. Let me tell you what standard Arabic is. It's similar to standard English. An article written in the New York Times, and an article published by the BBC in England, and an article published in an Indian newspaper in English, and an article written in a Bangladeshi English medium newspaper or website are all what kind of English? Standard. Anybody can read that and understand it despite their differences in language. You understand? There's a common English. You can read a British author, you can read an American author, you can read a Scottish author, you can read an African author if they wrote their book in what? It's standard English. That's the common English. So Arabic also has a common Arabic. That's the standard Arabic. That's the Arabic you find in newspapers. It's the Arabic you find on media channels, Al Jazeera, etc. That's standard Arabic. Okay? That's the Arabic you find in the beginning of the khutbah. Formal interviews, formal discussions, those are standard Arabic. Also, I will not be teaching you standard Arabic. I'm going to be teaching you the building blocks of something else called what? Very good. Classical Arabic. Classical Arabic. You know what that means? By the end of this class, you still cannot order some baklawa from an Arab restaurant in Arabic. Because you can't use classical Arabic over there. Now, how many kinds of Arabic are there? And what are we going to begin to learn in this class? Classical Arabic. Now, let's take another step. Let me make this bigger. 4 skills. Question? I will explain. Good question. What is the difference between standard and classical Arabic? What is the difference between English today and English at the time of Shakespeare? Is there a difference? Over time, the expressions, the grammar, the sentence structure, did it go through changes? The base stayed the same, but some things were differently said and differently spelled in Shakespearean English that is no longer alive or relevant today, right? So you don't go to Starbucks and say, "Hast thou possesseth a grande?" You can't use that anymore because that English is for that time. Do you understand? So what happens to every language is over time, as the world changes and different societies interact and technology changes, language changes. In fact, that happened to English even now. Standard English now, if you say to somebody that the president tweeted something insane, the president tweeted something insane. If somebody said that 30 years ago, and they wrote a piece, the president tweeted something insane, would that make any sense? 30 years ago, 40 years ago, would it make sense? No. Why? Because the technology had an impact on the language. If somebody told you in the early 90s, "Hey, I saw your Facebook. You would think they're a serial killer and they have a collection of cutout pictures of you, and that doesn't make any sense because the technology didn't exist, so these words did not exist, you understand? And the way we're using them didn't exist. The Arabic at the time of the Quran, the world was a certain way, and the Arabic was a certain way. Did the world keep changing ever since? And as the world kept changing ever since, do you think the changing world has an impact on language? Right? So the standard keeps shifting as the world shifts. When I say classical Arabic, I'm trying to take you back to the standard of Arabic before Islam won. Before Islam became victorious. Because actually for language, before I go to this, before Islam became victorious, Arabic was preserved in the desert, wasn't it? And then when Islam became victorious, we started taking over Roman territory and Persian territory and Asian territory and African territory. And all these different cultures are now accepting Islam, and they're all learning Arabic. Maybe thousands or 1,500 years ago, people are learning Arabic like you're sitting here learning Arabic, right? Is their Arabic high level or is it low level when they're starting? It's low level. And over time, the overall sophistication of Arabic is going down. Because the majority of the people are not Arab. And they don't have the classical tongue. Just think of the way, what local languages do we have here? Call out some languages that your grandmother speaks. I want to hear the grandmother's language. What are they? Punjabi? Bangla? Gujarati? Pashto? Urdu? Kashmiri? Farsi? Tashakur? Anybody else? Anything? No other languages here? English? Tamil? Is it true that your grandmother's language was more sophisticated than the grandkids' language? Right? Did it change? Did they have a wider vocabulary? Did they appreciate poetry more? Did they have more grand words and verbs to use in their language? And we just became like lesser. So over time, language, what happens to it? It gets simpler. And the ancient language was more rich and more dense and more poetic and more philosophical. And the Arabs, they were out in the desert. They were out in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And they had, you may have heard this before, the Arabs were really proud of their language. You ever heard that before? One of the reasons the Arabs were so proud of their language is they didn't have anything else to be proud of. What are they going to be proud of? What did they build? What Colosseum did they build? What pyramids did they build? Before Islam, what were the Arabs doing? They were Bedouins. And they had some empires that collapsed, but overall, the Arabs were an isolated people, especially in Hijaz. They were an isolated people. They were doing some trade, but they were no superpowers. They were not players on the world scene. So they were isolated. And they were in, what kind of a climate is Hijaz? What kind of an environment, natural environment is it? It's desert. In the desert, do you have a lot of scenery or a lack of scenery? You have a lack of scenery. You get to see the stars a lot. You get to see the desert, but not much else. And you know what happens in that environment? Your imagination is filled with the stars. Your imagination is filled with the desert landscape. You come up with 100 different words for the horse. You come up with lots of different words to describe a camel and a sword. Right? You have entire genres of poetry dedicated to the stars, naming each star. This is what they did because their imagination became wild because they were living in such an isolated kind of world, isolated kind of environment. When Islam won, did it stay like that? No, we became an international, multicultural, multi-continental religion, didn't we? So the language is getting affected, isn't it? I'll give you as a joke, but it's reality, some of the worst English spoken on planet Earth is spoken in New York City. It was also spoken in London. Some of the worst on earth. You know why? Because these cities became cultural centers where people from all over the world flew in. So they were all learning English as a second language. And so the overall English went down, and it keeps going down, it keeps going down. Some of the worst Arabic you will ever hear in your life is in Makkah. Some of the worst Arabic. Why? Why is the worst Arabic in Makkah? I was so excited the first time I went to Makkah after studying Arabic. I was like, أخيرا أجد الفرصة لأتحدث اللغة العربية مع العرب في بلاد القرآن بمكة. And I go and I see a Senegalese woman arguing with a Bangladeshi customer at one of those shops. And the Bangladeshi guy, and she's Senegalese, he's Bangladeshi, and she's saying to him, Panch riyal, panch riyal, panch riyal. What's going on here? And then I went to an Arab. I didn't know where to go. I lost my way. Couldn't find the hotel. Couldn't get data on my phone. I said, "Ayn al-funduq?" He goes, "Intaliq sida." Sida is not Arabic. When I say classical, I mean the Arabic before Islam became victorious. Basically, Arabic before it got contaminated by other cultures. You understand? And actually, this was one of the most important preservation movements in early Islam. We didn't just preserve the Quran, we didn't just preserve Hadith, we actually made an equally powerful movement to preserve the Arabic of the desert. Not the Arabic of Baghdad, not the Arabic of Kufa, not the Arabic, in Basra, but the Arabic in the Hijazi desert. How are the Bedouins talking? How do they use that word? You may have heard romanticized stories about scholars who spent 20 years traveling the desert to seek ilm. One of the ilm they were seeking, one of the knowledge they were seeking is just to sit around and watch people talk. Just so they can document, they use that word this way, they use this word this way, they use this word this way. And we documented entire lexicons like Lisan al-Arab and Al-Bahr al-Muhit. One day you'll get there. So what happens when you study a word in the English dictionary? You study a word in the English dictionary, you go to the dictionary, it tells you what it means and how many ways you can use it. When you go to an Arabic lexicon, you'll see the word, and then you'll see the way the Arabs in the deserts used to use it. And then somebody found a poem in which they use that word and the different variations of that word. You get an entire story of that word. Every word becomes a story. That's what kind of Arabic? Classical Arabic. That's classical Arabic. And standard Arabic and classical Arabic have 1.5 millennium between them. So they have many things in common, but many things are also what? Different. Many things are, the base is the same. The base is the same. But classical Arabic is much more rich. Yes, question. Okay, so it seems like classical Arabic is way more complicated and harder to learn. So why wouldn't they just make it easy? Yes, it's dead. Islam kept it alive. The Quran kept it alive. But what scholarship did in Islam is amazing. We preserved the ancient grammar, we preserved the ancient vocabulary, and we passed it down generation after generation. So even a scholar studying in India, a scholar studying in Indonesia, a scholar studying in Taiwan, a scholar studying anywhere in the world, when they're studying Arabic, they go back to what sources? The classical sources. Now the problem was, the classical sources are classical sources. They're really hard. They're really hard, really complicated stuff. My mission is to start you off at the super basic level, build your foundation, and get you ready for more and more difficult challenges. But by the time you get to the hard stuff, it's already easy for you because the foundation is solid. And the hardest part of the entire classical Arabic journey, I would argue the hardest part is two things. You're not taking any notes yet. No notes yet. The hardest part of classical Arabic study are two things called nahu and sarf. That's the hardest part. Everything else after that, piece of cake. Don't write this down. Haram alaik. No. The hardest part of learning Arabic is what two things? Nahu and sarf. Okay, now you already know how to